The western states during the 1800s were teeming with fascinating individuals, from iconic pioneers to infamous criminals. New Mexico boasted its fair share, among them Kit Carson. He was a rancher, trapper, soldier, and overall outdoorsman whose name has become synonymous with the American West. Kit Carson emerged as an American frontiersman, honing his skills as a hunter and trapper during his early 20s. His encounter with explorer John C. Fremont in 1842 propelled him into a pivotal role in expanding the United States borders to their current extent. By the 1850s, Carson assumed the role of a federal Indian agent, and he later contributed to the Union Army during the Civil War. Carson's legacy endures as an emblem of the pioneering era in the American West. Christopher Kit Carson was born on December 24, 1809, and became one of the most well-known people in the American West. Growing up on the Missouri frontier, he resided on lands purchased from the sons of frontiersman Daniel Boone. Carson was well acquainted with both the allure and perils of the region from an early age. His family often lived in fear of potential Native American attacks on their cabin. Following his father's passing in 1818, Carson, then just a farmer, assumed responsibilities to support his widowed mother, who had 10 children to care for alone. He abandoned his formal education and toiled on the family's property. Carson, regrettably, never mastered reading, a fact he later attempted to conceal and felt ashamed of. At the age of 14, Carson was bound as an apprentice to a saddle maker in Franklin, Missouri. Yet, he yearned for liberty and excitement. In 1826, Carson escaped from Franklin, breaching his agreement with the saddle maker. He set out westward along the Santa Fe Trail, securing work as a laborer with a group of merchants. Over time, Carson mastered the art of trapping in the often challenging territories of the West, demonstrating resilience and toughness despite his small stature. In 1829, he teamed up with Ewing Young to trap in Arizona and California. Additionally, Carson found employment with Jim Bridger and the Hudson Bay Company on separate occasions. During his travels, Carson became proficient in both Spanish and French. Spending much time among Native American communities, he also acquired fluency in several of their languages and even wedded 2 Native American women. Unlike many of his peers, Carson was known for his modest demeanor and restrained way of life. One associate described him as clean as a hound's tooth. In 1842, Carson crossed paths with explorer John C. Fremont, an officer in the United States Topographical Corps, while traveling aboard a steamboat. Fremont promptly enlisted Carson as a guide for his inaugural expedition. With his extensive experience in the wilderness, Carson was the perfect fit to assist the group in navigating their way to the South Pass in the Rocky Mountains. Fremont's subsequent reports lauding Carson's abilities contributed significantly to his rise as one of the most renowned mountain men of the era. Carson also later achieved fame as a beloved hero in numerous Western novels. Carson went with Fremont on a surveying trip in 1843 that took them to Fort Vancouver in the Pacific Northwest and then to Utah's Great Salt Lake. Carson also served as a guide for the 1845-46 expedition to California and Oregon. During this period, he became embroiled in the Mexican-American War. While in California, Fremont's mission shifted to a military operation, and he and Carson lent support to the American settlers' uprising, known as the Bear Flag Revolt. Sent to Washington, D.C. to convey the news of the triumph, Carson's journey was interrupted in New Mexico. There, he was tasked with guiding General Stephen W. Kearny and his soldiers to California. Kearny's troops engaged in battle with Mexican forces near San Pasqual, California, but were overpowered. Carson managed to evade the enemy and secure assistance from American troops in San Diego. Following the war, Carson returned to New Mexico, where he settled into life as a rancher. In 1853, Carson assumed a new responsibility, accepting the role of federal Indian agent for northern New Mexico, primarily working with the Utes and the Jicarilla Apaches. He witnessed firsthand the impact of Western migration by white settlers on Native American communities, believing that Native American attacks on white settlers stemmed from desperation. To prevent the extinction of these peoples, Carson advocated for the establishment of Indian reservations. With the onset of the Civil War in 1861, Carson was enlisted by the Union to assist in organizing the 1st New Mexico Volunteer Infantry Regiment. Serving as a lieutenant colonel, he participated in the brutal encounter with Confederate soldiers at the Battle of Valverde in 1862. Carson spearheaded campaigns against Native American tribes in the area, notably the push to compel the Navajo to move to the Bosque Redondo Reservation at Fort Sumner. Carson and his troops decimated crops and slaughtered livestock, their actions opening the door for traditional enemy tribes of the Navajo to launch their own assaults. Eventually famished and worn out, the Navajo surrendered in 1864 and were compelled to trek roughly 300 miles to the reservation. This arduous journey, dubbed the Long Walk, proved harrowing, claiming the lives of hundreds of participants. Elevated to the rank of brigadier general in 1865, Carson relocated to Colorado following the war and assumed command of Fort Garland. During his tenure, he brokered a peace agreement with the Utes before stepping down in 1867 due to worsening health. In his last months, Carson served as the Superintendent of Indian Affairs for Colorado Territory. After an exhausting journey to the East Coast in 1868, he returned to Colorado in poor health. Following the passing of his 3rd and final wife in April, Carson himself passed away approximately a month later, on May 23, 1868. Reportedly, his last words were, "Doctor, compadre, adios."